I'm tempted to ask you a personal question.
Go knock yourself out, whatever you want.
I mean, I'm just curious about how you're thinking about this thing, and I'm wondering, like, are you terrified that you're gonna have to 40-year-old Steven or 45-year-old Steven is gonna be looking back and thinking, oh, like, what are the mistakes that I made now?
Yeah, kind of, but like this is one of those balancing acts. So on one sense, people ask me sometimes, my fans will be like, oh, like you should write a book on something. And it's like, why would I put anything I believe right now onto paper when in 3 years I'm probably going to think what everything now is, stupid. So in one sense, yeah, I kind of think about that. But then in another sense, I would think if I looked back 5 years from now and I was the exact same person, I'd be worried that I'd stop growing. That would be a concern of mine. So the way that I try to think right now is I only want to take a strong position on something that I feel incredibly grounded in. And for everything else, I just want to leave myself open to change. I think there are like 4 or 5 like things politically where it's like, these are things that are true and I'm probably never going to move off these, and I never have. But for everything else, I try not to be so married. Like I'll try to caveat, even if I feel like, socialized medicine is very important in the United States. We need this, unless there's studies showing otherwise, right? I try to keep my mind open, so I'm like open to change in the future. Yeah.
It sounds like you're reluctant to write a book because something will be set in stone.
I feel like a lot of people, when I see, so I've existed on the internet for like 13 years now. And I think part of my continued success is that I'm able to kind of like adapt and change as like society and time goes on, while still holding on to something that is important or something that makes me me. I'm not just like new area, totally new person, but there's still like that core thing of me there. And then there's moving through time. Something that gets scary for me is I'll see, especially because I do political stuff, right? I'll see political figures that have been in like if you joined a political org and then you've got a stake in that political org and then you start doing content with that political org, it feels like you've robbed yourself of the ability to grow, right? Like let's say tomorrow, Ben Shapiro wakes up and he has an epiphany and he's like, you know what? I actually think that government entitlement programs and welfare are probably one of the most important things in the United States. Could he even say that publicly? It would probably destroy him to do it. Would he even be able to feel that? There's probably some degree of ideological and audience capture going on where it's like, well, I'm a conservative. I don't know if I should think that. This is probably wrong. I'm stupid. And like my audience is going to hate me for it. So yeah, that's something that I see some people who will like, I am the socialist, I am the capitalist, I am the libertarian. And then they get so locked into that phase that they've robbed themselves of even have the opportunity to grow or change as they get older.
Politics is not my area of expertise, but I'm really curious. So I heard about this tweet that Ann Coulter did where she was like talking about abortion rights or something. I don't even know the details. It's like third hand. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but I've probably seen it if it's Ann Coulter and it's about abortion.
What do you think it says?
Well, I mean, she was the original staunch, like lady, kind of like asshole conservative lady. So I imagine for a long period of life, she was ultra super against it. Has that opinion changed recently, or?
Yeah.
I'm Googling this now to see what it is. Sorry, I don't know why I'm Googling it. You could just tell me. Yeah,
I don't know the details of what she said, but she was talking about how like this is like where the restriction of abortion rights in America has like gone too far or something. I don't know what the
exact... I just saw this on April 5th. She said, please stop pushing strict limits on abortion or there will be no Republicans left. Is it this tweet?
Yeah,
you think?
Probably.
Okay. Uh-huh.
What do you think about that?
I think it's absolutely true. I've always said that I think that there are 2 big issues that the political parties have right now where if they could just loosen up on them, they would get a whole bunch of followers. For Republicans, I feel like they need to drop the ultra strict abortion thing and just concede that like abortion from like first trimester at least is okay. And it would just open their base up so much. And for Democrats, it's the obsession over guns. They just need to like leave the AR-15s alone. They're very sparingly used in shootings, and it would open them up to a whole bunch of like new people. But those are like 2 issues that both sides are really dug in on, and they lose, I think, a lot of political capital over both of them. Yeah, but the abortion thing is a really big one for Republicans, and it like motivates the hell out of Democrats to go out to the polls and vote.
And so, what do you think about her kind of saying her more recent tweet?
Well, I mean, that just sounded like political strategy to me. I don't know if that was like reflecting like personal growth,
Well, so because what I'm kind of curious about is why do you think that political parties can't grow, right? Because you're sort of saying if you join, let's say like a politically oriented content creation engine, that sort of staunches your growth. Whereas one of the things that I've been super curious about is like, why can't people change their minds? Like we talk about changing your mind as a politician is the biggest sin that you can commit. Why do you think that is?
I feel like people, this is something that I try to keep in mind. I'm going to play a little bit of a language game here, but it captures an idea. I am a person that likes capitalism, but I'm not like a capitalist. Or I might be a person that plays PC games, but I'm not a PC gamer. I think that people will take the ideas, and rather than them having a strong identity that like connects to these ideas, those ideas are kind of absorbed into the identity and they become part of the identity. And when something is part of your identity, it becomes very, very, very hard to change that without feeling really bad about yourself. I tend to believe that people have almost completely binary opinions of themselves. Like you're either completely good or completely bad. It's very hard to accept any fault in yourself without it having a lot of cognitive dissonance. I think that's where things like health at every size comes from, right? Like I can't like love myself if I also accept that there's like an issue with my weight. So the weight thing actually isn't a big deal at all, you know? And I think with politics, I think it's similar where you're not just like a person who is a Republican. You are a Republican. That is who you are. You don't just have Republican ideas. You are this thing. And so to change your mind on it becomes very, very, very difficult because it's like recognizing and then expelling a fault within yourself. I think that's my feeling on it.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, the only thing I would add to that is that I think that quality is actually quite fluctuant. So if you look at, this is more from Eastern psychology, but the more black and white and identified with a particular quality you are, correlates with the amount of emotion that you feel, especially negative emotion.
Okay.
So even if you ask people of diehard political parties, if you can engage them in a calm discussion, or anyone who has strongly held beliefs, this has been my experience anyway, that if you can engage them in a calm discussion, they themselves, so this is like literally what we do in addiction psychiatry and motivational interviewing, is you've got someone who's in denial. I'm not an alcoholic. So this is an ego thing. You know, they don't think about alcohol addiction as a disease or whatever. They say, I am not a alcoholic. Sure. So there's an aspect of ego that arises, and this is the identification that you're talking about. And the really interesting thing about ego is ego arises anytime you have negative emotion as a defensive mechanism to protect you from pain. So when someone says, hey, you just wrecked our car, or you were driving with the kids drunk, they could have died. That thought is painful, and thus the ego arises and tries to protect you from it by denying. The really interesting thing about disarming that is that if you can remove the negative emotion from the equation, people are actually able to admit their mistakes. And one of the things that I'm just, noticing is that in our current society, if you make a mistake, anyone who disagrees with you, and this is kind of what you were saying about, you can't get away with what you did 10 years ago. If you make a single mistake, like we don't let people make mistakes anymore. We just, I think that
crucify them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't ever admit that you were wrong.
Yeah. Real quick, it's so funny. Something that you said about this, I'm sure a lot of the therapy techniques, everything you learn can probably be, you can probably find them in police interrogations too. Do you ever watch any of these interrogation videos?
I've seen some of these, yeah.
That thing you just said about removing negative emotion to get somebody to kind of admit a mistake, it's a very important interrogation tactic. If you've got a criminal that's done something bad in an interrogation, you're not going to sit there and say, didn't you kill him? Didn't you kill him? Didn't you kill him? Usually as their interrogator, you're going to try to build up a lot of like, they were really unfair to you, weren't they? Like, you probably wanted to hit that guy because like, who wouldn't? Like anybody would want to hit him in that circumstance. Like he was totally unfair for you. Like I would probably attack someone, right? You're removing the negative emotion related to like, or rather like the judgment from them admitting something bad. And it's like, you're kind of like building a rapport with them there. And then it gets people more freely in those interrogation rooms to admit their mistakes. It's just funny that you said it that way, because I remember in the videos where a cop will do that and then the person will start volunteering information because they don't feel like there's like any negative judgment there anymore. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about building an alliance is the broader idea of what we would talk about, And I saw there was a video recently where there's someone who is being reviled by the internet because they were in a DUI. And people are just stunned by the level of denial. And it's like, well, when you're accusatory and stuff like that, people are just going to do weird psychological stuff. But
yeah, I wish it's so hard. Are you talking about the woman that was in the room or something different?
I'm not sure, but I tend not to comment on specific people. I just noticed this thing.
Yeah. Something that I try to get people to understand this all the time. Even when I'm arguing with people and I hang up a call and my chat will be like, "Oh, why are they so stupid? Why didn't they just admit they were wrong? Blah blah blah." Really, really hard to admit fault in the middle of a thing.
Yeah.
Like I tell people like I'm probably not going to do it, and I don't expect anybody to do it. Usually, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm just there to kind of like plant the seeds. But it's very, very, very rare, and it takes an exceptional human to be like, you know what? I think I was wrong in this circumstance. Generally, people need to cool off, and then hopefully whatever words you left them with will start to like take hold, and then like there's like a quiet admission later, and then at some point maybe like, yeah, I think you're right about this, you know. But getting people to change their mind in the heat of the moment is almost impossible, and nobody ever seems to recognize that, even though we all have that problem. Every human being has that problem, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I I think we sort of understand that in the clinical world pretty well, right? Even when we've got, and I just wonder a little bit about just the antagonistic relationships of especially like politics, where it's like people are just so at each other's throats. There's something that I have just this instinct. I have no idea if this is right or wrong, and this could be the height of Dunning-Kruger, but that, you know, if you kind of get people to sit down and like just have a frank discussion with them, where first of all you try to understand their view, which I think is something that's very, very missing in today's society. We all try to convince. Even then, if you sort of think about it, like we talk about something you're good at, right? Debates. Debates are sort of the default way of discussing different views. And there's this idea that even in that frame, there is a winner and a loser. That people don't, I mean, I guess this is hopefully a good example. I don't think I'm debating you about anything, but I think we're I don't think people of differing views sit down and like have discussions for the purpose of like learning something together or even trying to understand the other side. It's about, I'm going to poke holes in this other person's argument because I'm right and they're wrong, as opposed to, hey, this person believes something drastically different from what I do. Maybe I need to learn something because this really makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, I super agree. One of the things that I kind of push for a lot in conversations is like to just understand why a person feels the way they do. There's like one truth that I've kind of like stumbled upon that I feel very strongly about. I don't think I'll ever change my mind on it. Is people's feelings sometimes can be very irrational, but people's feelings are never, ever, ever random. Like they always feel something for a reason. And I think it's important to figure out why they feel the way they do, right? Somebody might be incredibly racist or incredibly sexist or incredibly whatever. And it might be like, even the way they like, well, I think that anytime I run into this type of person, it's going to be in trouble. It's like, that's not a rational belief. That's not true. Like the data, the stats, blah, blah, blah. But it's important to recognize, well, why do you feel that way? Because that feeling didn't come from nowhere. So it's either the type of media they're consuming, it's some experiences they've had, it's things they've been told by family or friends. And it's really important to identify that particular thing to understand why that person feels that way. Because a lot of people go into some of these conversations assuming like, oh, well, the reason why we disagree is obviously because this guy is evil. And it's like, well, no, I mean, he's probably not evil. There's probably a reason why he disagrees with you, you know?
So I'm a little bit confused. Why do you say that emotions are rational?
Or I'm sorry, when I'm saying rational, I mean like in the, like let's say somebody says that there's a minority that they see on TV, so they think, well, anytime I run into that person, I'm probably going to get robbed. We would say that like that's in a way that's like irrational because statistically speaking, this is probably not going to happen. The feeling itself, I guess, isn't irrational because it's built on some particular thing. But like the way that that belief manifests in the world, like the outcome that you think is going to happen, that's not very rational. Yeah. But the feeling is there for a reason. It's important to identify why the feeling is there.
Yeah. So I mean, I would kind of, I think we're saying the same thing, but I think it's a little bit more semantics. But I think even for what you just said, if there's a reason for them to feel that way, which can be deduced, right? That implies that there is rationality behind it. And that's like literally what we sort of know is that if people are experiencing an emotion, if you even look at something like a trauma response, which is the textbook definition of an irrational response. So if I hear a door slam, I believe I am in danger and that someone is trying to hurt me. But that's not, you may look at that from an objective standpoint and say that is irrational, but actually like what we sort of know clinically is that this is actually a completely rational belief. It has to do with the way that our brain processes information and the way that it attaches certain associations to particular stimuli. And even when it comes to things like racism and stuff like that, there's a really good test, which I think is publicly available, some kind of perception test out of a laboratory at Harvard that essentially measures how racist you are. And
So you're talking about the implicit bias test?
yeah, maybe it's an implicit bias test. And the really interesting thing is that even people of ethnic minorities are racist towards ethnic minorities because it's some of the way that we're conditioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.